Sekali lagi kami ucapkan terima kasih kepada Pak Wemantan, dan selanjutnya kami akan menuju kepada British Ambassador Mr. Dominic untuk menyampaikan paparannya selama 15 menit.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Shalom, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Selamat pagi. Bagus sekali. Masih hidup di belakang. Terima kasih. Yang terhormat Wakil Menteri Pertanian Bapak Sudaryono, yang terhormat Gubernur Dilemhannas Bapak Eko Margiono Papat, Ibu dan hadirin sekalian yang saya hormati. Nama saya Dominic Jami, saya Duta Besar Inggris untuk Indonesia dan Timor Leste. Saya juga seorang aktivis iklim dan kadang-kadang saya naik pesawat terbang yang cepat bersama teman-teman militer. Senang sekali bisa hadir di acara ini. Terima kasih telah mengundang saya untuk berbicara tentang isu yang sangat penting. Tidak hanya bagi Inggris dan Indonesia, tetapi juga untuk seluruh umat manusia. Perubahan iklim adalah isu yang sudah menjadi darah daging dalam kebijakan lingkungan pemerintah Inggris. Kenapa? Karena kita semua memiliki kewajiban untuk memastikan bahwa anak dan cucu kita bisa menikmati lingkungan yang lebih hijau, lebih sehat dan lebih aman. Topik hari ini adalah Green Leadership atau kepemimpinan hijau. Saya akan memaparkan beberapa pemimpin hijau dari sains, politisi yang mungkin beberapa dari saudara sudah pernah dengar, namun juga rock star Coldplay. Saya ingin meyakinkan Anda bahwa kepemimpinan berawal dari Anda dan saya. Kita jangan hanya menunggu dari pemimpin di atas untuk memimpin kita. Green leadership adalah kewajiban kita semua. Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, ada banyak hal penting yang ingin saya sampaikan dalam kesempatan ini, dan saya yakin bahwa Bapak dan Ibu sekalian bisa berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris dengan lancar. Setuju?
Setuju.
Alhamdulillah. Oleh kerana itu, untuk menghemat waktu, izinkan saya melanjutkan pidato saya dalam bahasa Inggris. Terima kasih. The twin crises of climate and nature loss have made our planet hard to live on. We are already right up against what the Earth can tolerate. But it is not too late, although it is nearly too late to do something about this. As you can see from this slide, we have options. High emissions will lead to 4 or more degrees of warming in the worst case, but it doesn't have to. Human activity, as we heard earlier, has already made the world 1.1 degrees warmer on average, and already we see unusual and damaging weather patterns, floods, fires and storms caused by this change in temperature. And the sum of all the climate policies of my government, your government or the other governments will not be enough to stop us reaching 2 degrees of global warming. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is very serious. It's serious for my country and it's serious for Indonesia as an archipelagic nation. But the technology to stop this already exists and it is affordable. Now these dire warnings, this science, doesn't come from my government or your government. It comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, atau Panel Antar Pemerintah tentang Perubahan Iklim, a group of world-leading scientists who have studied this issue exhaustively. And in the UK, we base our policies on this science. So in Britain, in Inggris, how did we get here? British people have long memories of the dark side of industrial growth. 250 years ago, the UK was the first country to experience an industrial revolution and a shift to fossil fuels for our energy. Getting into that economy brought us wealth and power, I admit that, but it cost us our air quality, environmental degradation in our country, and it cost us our traditional ways of life. And this came to a head in 1952 in London with the Great Smog, a week of air quality so bad that 8,000 people died during that week, literally, because the way we were using our fuel was killing us. And as a child, I remember in the UK how we started our transition away from coal. I remember power cuts because of power stations without the guaranteed fuel supply. I remember strikes by coal miners as we moved away. I remember thousands of people on the streets protesting that the government had forgotten about the just part of just energy transition. 4 decades later, we are about to finish the job. In the United Kingdom, the very last coal-fired power station will close this year. So we are now leading on climate action. Karena saya dari Inggris, saya ingin berbagi tentang para pemimpin hijau di Inggris. Merdeka adalah Perdana Menteri Inggris dan dari kedua kubu politik. Yang pertama adalah Gordon Brown, who brought in the Climate Change Act. Next, Prime Minister Theresa May, who raised our ambition to net zero by 2050. Next, Boris Johnson hosted the World Summit on Climate Change, COP26, in 2021, inviting President Pak Jokowi Widodo. Within a week of taking power last month, Sir Keir Starmer, the UK's new Prime Minister, said we are determined to reach zero carbon electricity by 2030. Just think of that, zero carbon electricity by 2030. That's renewables, that's getting rid of oil, getting rid of gas, getting rid of coal. This is a story about persistence through political changes. In the UK, our system, called the Climate Change Committee, has survived 5 general elections, it has survived 7 prime ministers, and it sets our carbon budget, which is how much carbon we can produce each year while still remaining on track for zero carbon by 2050. And our carbon budgets have helped us halve our emissions since 1990. And it works because it is based on data, science, and evidence. And if we get the right policies in place, taking carbon out of our economies can generate wealth. Decarbonisation can bring 1, thousands of new engineering jobs. 2, it can bring significantly cleaner air. And believe me, if you live in London or in Jakarta, cleaner air is pretty appealing. And 3, it can bring economic growth. The UK economy has grown by 80% while we have halved our emissions, in part because we've embraced green technology centres. But tackling climate change is not just about what government does. Business has a vital role to play. Pemimpin-pemimpin hijau selanjutnya adalah 2 ekonom. Yang pertama adalah Lord Nicholas Stern, who delivered a groundbreaking report on the economics of climate change in 2006. He basically showed why it is cheaper to stop climate change than to deal with the consequences of having created climate change. And he sparked a transformation of how to bring in private sector capital, how to bring in private sector money and ingenuity into producing solutions for climate change. Lord Stern then came to Indonesia to become a commissioner for Indonesia's own low-carbon development initiative, which demonstrates that higher rates of growth and development can be achieved in a sustainable way. Ekonom yang kedua adalah Partha Dasgupta, who produced a report in 2021 which gave the world the tools to value our planet's natural capital. This is the plants, the animals, the land, the seas that make up our countries, which has been astonishingly undervalued and overexploited. And providing an economic value for nature, Dasgupta showed what it costs us and our children to exploit nature the way we do. Now, your country, Indonesia, is a staggeringly biodiverse country. It has a very special place in the world, and nature is outstandingly valuable asset for you. Valuing nature matters enormously as we make our policies for the future. Tetapi kepemimpinan bukan hanya untuk politisi dan ekonom. Dari kalangan musisi, apakah ada yang pernah mendengar Coldplay, band dari Inggris? Did anybody see Coldplay at GBK last year? Pinjam dulu 100? Yeah. So they completed a world tour using sustainable aviation fuel. They used renewable energy for their entire global trip, and they cut plastics out of every show they did. The way they generated electricity for their concerts was through the energy from their fans dancing at their concerts. Just how cool is that? And they've invested the proceeds for the money they earned in tree planting and conservation. Now, they're not climate scientists or experts. They're just people who decided to make a change. And that's my point today. You don't need to be a green expert to be a green leader. Now, one from the UK who has helped to communicate the challenge of climate change that I want to mention is Sir David Attenborough. Apakah ada yang kenal green leader kelima saya, David Attenborough? No, maybe not. Well, he is one of the world's most famous wild animal filmmakers. He spent 70 years building public awareness of natural history, conservation and climate change. And in the UK, people vote for climate change, and they vote for climate change because he communicated what the problem is with what we are doing. So they vote for policies to stop climate change because of David Attenborough's work. The stories he tells brings the evidence and the data to life. Baik, pesan yang ingin saya sampaikan hari ini, siapapun Anda, lakukan apa yang bisa Anda lakukan. Apabila Anda bertanggungjawab terkait pengadaan alutsista, pilih alutsista yang ramah lingkungan. Kalau Anda adalah pembuat kebijakan di kementerian, pastikan kebijakan tersebut berpihak pada pelestarian lingkungan dan berbasis pada data terbaru. Dan tentu saja apabila Anda penyanyi rockstar seperti Coldplay, Anda bisa selenggarakan konser yang ramah lingkungan. Saya juga ingin mengajak untuk melibatkan semua lapisan masyarakat, baik yang tua maupun yang muda, laki-laki maupun perempuan. Saya diberitahu bahwa seminar ini diselenggarakan oleh Ibu Zoom. Saya senang sekali mendengar bahwa perempuan yang memimpin di sini hari ini. Bapak harus diakui bahwa tidak ada banyak perempuan di acara hari ini hadir di sini. Saya juga ingin memperkenalkan Anda kedua perempuan green leaders yang menginspirasi saya. Perempuan pertama dan pemimpin yang keenam saya adalah Mama Ines. Mama Ines is a lady who lives in Nusa Tenggara Timur. I met her when I visited her village, and I saw what a transformational impact the project that the government of Indonesia and the government of the UK had worked on together. This is a renewable energy collaboration called Mentari. And renewable energy had had a life-changing impact on her children, who can study at night, on the streets of her village, which are safer because of electric light, and because she can keep food cold in her warung. Renewable energy is cheap, it's a local solution, and it can be used in the most remote parts of Indonesia. Dan perempuan kedua dan pemimpin yang ketujuh adalah pemimpin muda. This is in fact my daughter. Now, ask yourself, how can we engage young people about climate change? Actually, young people don't need me or you to engage them about climate change. They're the ones from whom I am learning, and it is my daughter who is telling me what I need to be doing in my generation about climate change.
Excuse me, Mr. Dominic, already 10 minutes, 5 minutes later.
Very good. Apakah Anda punya anak-anak? Baik, Anda tahu apa yang saya maksud, My daughter is the first person to demand that I take action. So let me leave you with 3 messages. Yang pertama, menggunakan data dalam pembuatan kebijakan. Use data to drive evidence-based policy making. Find a way to make climate policy for the long term based on facts, which is protected from short-term political trends. Yang kedua, kita harus bertindak sekarang, not in the future. We must act now. Climate change will hurt the poorest people the most, and it will hurt your children and my children. If there is anything we can do now, do it. Dan yang ketiga, setiap orang mempunyai peran. Everyone has a role to play. It doesn't matter if you are in the military, in the police, an ambassador in government, a deputy minister for agriculture, or a rock band playing at GBK. You can be a green leader. Okay, apabila apa yang saya katakan menginspirasi Anda untuk menjadi green leader, silakan hubungan kami. Saya mau bekerjasama dengan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian untuk masa depan yang lebih hijau dan berkelanjutan. Bersama kita bisa. Akhirnya I want to close my speech with a little pantun, and I hope you will join me by saying cakap. Ready? Siap? Jalan-jalan ke Bekasi.
Cakep.
Jangan lupa Bekasi dasi.
Cakep.
Perubahan iklim pasti bisa diatasi melalui kerjasama, diplomasi, dan aksi.
Baik, thank you so much Mr. Dominic for your presentation. Dari apa yang disampaikan oleh Mr. Dominic tadi, memang kita mengetahui bahwa apapun yang kita lakukan di muka bumi ini sedikit banyaknya atau mungkin bahkan banyak, ini berpengaruh terhadap perubahan iklim. Dan perubahan iklim ini pun tentu harus mendapatkan perhatian kita dan harus kita atasi. Pemerintah Inggris pun memiliki concern yang luar biasa sekali terhadap persoalan perubahan iklim ini. Oleh karena itu, sejak sekarang pun kita harus berupaya melakukan apapun kegiatannya dengan melakukan misalkan dalam kegiatan ekonomi hijau. Nah, transisi ekonomi hijau tadi dari apa yang disampaikan oleh beliau bisa memberikan peluang-peluang baru lagi bagi masa depan. Mulai dari menciptakan pekerjaan baru, udara yang bersih dan juga pertumbuhan ekonomi. Disampaikan tadi ada beberapa tokoh-tokoh dunia yang menunjukkan juga concernnya terhadap dampak perubahan iklim ini dan bagaimana cara mengatasi perubahan iklim ini. Bukan hanya mereka orang-orang hebat saja, bukan hanya para ilmuwan ekonomi saja, ataupun juga tokoh besar saja di dunia, tetapi juga ada salah satu tokoh yang merupakan ibu-ibu. Tadi kita lihat juga apa yang ia lakukan juga memberikan sebuah dampak yang luar biasa bagi untuk mengatasi masalah perubahan iklim ini. Semua harus bekerja sama, semua harus punya keinginan untuk menciptakan bumi yang lebih baik dan lebih sehat lagi. Tadi disampaikan juga oleh Mr. Dominic bahwa Inggris pun membuka tangan selebar-lebarnya untuk bekerja sama untuk mengatasi persoalan perubahan iklim yang semakin mengkhawatirkan ini.